What's up, guys? I'm EJ, and I'm joined by Kendall, and thank you so much for checking out this edition of our virtual NBA Draft War Room. Today, we're going to be talking about the Phoenix Suns. Kendall, the Phoenix Suns really became the darlings of the NBA bubble after a kind of an interesting season where they seemed to make some strides, but definitely were not in playoff contention. They really turned it on when it got to the bubble. They didn't lose a game during the seeding games, and kind of became the favorites for a lot of fans, especially fans who didn't have teams in the bubble. They were so close to getting to a playoff playing game, but were unable to get one of those spots. That, of course, went to the Grizzlies and Blazers. But the Suns come into this offseason with a lot of hope. You know, it's been a really down time for Phoenix Suns basketball pretty much since Steve Nash left. And they had their last playoff run. They have just been nowhere near really contention. But Devin Booker showed himself to be a true star in the bubble. Some of their young role players really showed up and looked like they're going to be maybe foundational pieces for the future. So a lot looking up for the Phoenix Suns nowadays.
Yeah, I would argue the Suns were the best team in the bubble. I mean, look, I know a lot of people talk about the Lakers, but did the Lakers go 7?
Yeah, well, that's like the people at UCF, Central Florida, saying that they're the national champions in college football.
Suns are the bubble champs. I don't care. I don't care what LeBron's got to say about who deserves respect. Devin Booker and the Phoenix Suns deserve their respect.
Yeah, James Jones deserves his damn respect. And Monty Williams deserves their damn respect.
Exactly. So, the Suns, a very interesting team because, if we would have done this video before the bubble, it would have been a completely different video. We would have been talking about, all right, so what can you get for Devin Booker?
Absolutely.
And now we're talking about, all right, how can we make a team that could compete, in the Western Conference? It's crazy, but that's where we're at now, and I think the Suns are actually in a very, very good position in the Western Conference. You have a top 10 pick. You have a team that showed in the bubble that they could be one of the better teams in the West next season. So it's very exciting times in Phoenix, Arizona.
And one last thing before we get into the breakdown of their offseason. The Suns, to me, were maybe the ultimate example of something I said very early on during our podcast when the restart games started happening. We started seeing different guys emerge, and teams look different, and teams that were good look kind of shaky. Teams that were shaky look excellent. The Suns were the epitome of the example that I tried to say that the restart was a new season. Like, whatever we thought of these teams before the bubble, that was changed. Guys matured, guys went on their game, some guys got a little older, some guys weren't in as good shape. So it was like a new season. So the Suns season from the past was that. It was the past. The Suns that came into the bubble were a much more confident group, much more together group, much more experienced group, and their young players again clearly worked on their game, and they were a better team. That was year 2 Cam Reddish. That was Cam Johnson. That was year 2, year 3 Bridges. Ayton, those guys. This was not, these guys in there in as second year of rookies.
Might have been about year 4 Ayton because he had a bunch of hiatus.
It's fair, yeah. He had a bunch of time off this season for various reasons, but they matured a lot, and they were a totally different team by the time we saw them. And so what we'll see by the time they come back from whenever we end up playing these new games in this new season, I'm excited to see. So quickly, let's go through the Suns rundown for this offseason. So they finished with a 34-39 record that was just short of making the NBA playoffs as a play-in team, or at least having the opportunity to make the playoffs as a in that play-in game. They own pick number 10 in this upcoming draft. For team needs, I put rim protection as the first thing. They were almost dead last in blocks. Aaron Baines is a strong physical presence, but he's not really much of a shot blocker. Ayton, similar, strong physical presence, not much of a shot blocker, and Baines is a free agent, so he might not even be there next year. They definitely need some more length, I think, at the 5 spot and 4 spot, and guys who can protect the rim a little better. I also put backcourt scoring as something that they could probably look at as well. Besides Devin Booker, none of their other guards really put a lot of fear in any defense, in terms of being, true threats as offensive players. So I think that getting some scoring in that backcourt, whether it be another 2-man behind Booker and Booker plays a little more 1, or especially the point guard position for sure. They could definitely use an upgrade there. And then I put rebounding as well. They were also one of the worst rebounding teams. They actually were like not terrible, but Ayton averages like 11 rebounds. So he really is the only guy out there who you look at as a plus rebounder for that team. Even a guy like Baines isn't really as good a rebound maybe you would hope, given his size and strength. Booker gets a lot of rebounds for them, so they really need to probably improve that aspect of the court. They're kind of a weird team because they do kind of rely more on speed and shooting. So they're playing guys like Oubre and Cam Johnson at the 4. Of course, those guys aren't going to be rebounders, but I think even on the bench they could probably use a little more rebounding presence as well. Free agents. So I mentioned Aaron Baines. He's a free agent. He's an important player for them. Dario Saric, obviously a very important player for them, as a restricted free agent. We'll see what they do with him. Javon Carter is an excellent defensive player, and he's also going to be a restricted free agent. Frank Kaminsky has a team option. Eli Okobo is kind of a team option. He has a non-guaranteed contract going into next year. Cam Payne has a team option. Sheck Diallo has a team option, and then Tariq Owens, former Texas Tech great, has a two-way deal that is
expiring. Shout out Cam Payne, who early on in the bubble looked very shaky, but by the time the bubble, those seeding games started, I mean, he was a good player.
Yeah, he played well. Everybody on that team, it's funny, that team has a bunch of guys that you kind of came into the bubble with great question marks or skepticism about, and you left with none. Not anybody on the roster. I mean, that whole team really came together in a really special way. That was a special 8 games for the Suns. There's no question about it. Yeah. So when it comes to targets, Kendall, who are you looking at for the Phoenix Suns at number 10?
Yeah, I mean, the Suns, to me, I think the primary position, because look, at 10, yes, you want to fill a need, but you also want to get a guy that can really be a dynamic starter for you. And I don't know if you really look. I think the spot that really where they need a future starter, a guy long term, is that point guard position. Because look, Ricky Rubio is obviously a good placeholder right now, but I don't think he is the point guard of the future. I don't think James Jones would tell you that. And, I think that's the area where they need to find a guy who can be a backcourt mate long-term with Devin Booker. And for being honest with ourselves, I don't know if the Suns team will ever draft this high again in the near future. I mean, again, the way they played, I mean, look, obviously the bottom could obviously fall out next season, and they could be in the top 5. And, but
the minute Devin Booker decides I want out, then all bets are off.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. Yes, they could be drafting. They could be having the number 1 pick next year. Well, in this NBA, I don't know. But based off of how well they played in the bubble, they could be a playoff team, for the next couple of years. And if that's the case, you're not going to have a chance to draft a lottery pick point guard necessarily. So I would take that chance now, lock up my backcourt with Devin Booker. And for me, I'm looking at Tyrese Halliburton. I think he's a guy that long term fits excellently next to Devin Booker in the same way that Ricky Rubio fit excellently next to Devin Booker. Throughout Booker's career, he's had trouble, not with his own game because he's always been a very good player, but he's had his weaker seasons when he's had to be the de facto point guard, and they didn't really necessarily have a guard next to him. And he had one of his better years last year because they had a point guard, Ricky Rubio, who could not only hit the open shot, but can also make plays for Devin Booker and get the ball in the right spots for Devin Booker. And is also a very good defensive player, so Booker didn't have to worry about that as well. So, I mean, Halliburton has a lot of the same, skill sets and strengths and weaknesses as Ricky Rubio, especially Rubio now. I think he's a better shooter than Rubio was coming into the league, but Rubio now can hit the jump shot. Not a guy that's ever going to, really, shot create, but neither is Halliburton. But Halliburton can hit open jump shots. And, I think that works well as well because he needs to create spacing for a guy like Devin Booker, who's an excellent player in the isolation. So I think Halliburton to be an excellent fit. And I think he's a guy that could, not only is he a guy that could be a great long-term piece for you, but he's a guy that could help you next year. He's one of the more, ready-made players in this draft in terms of his pro-ready players in this draft because of his ability to make guys around him better, hit open shots, defend. He's a smart, high IQ player. That's a guy that he could potentially start for them next year, but obviously you have Rubio, but not much of a change of pace. That's the concern. It's like, all right, you take out Rubio and then you go to Halliburton, but Halliburton could play some two. He could play with a Javon Carter or a Campaign if Campaign's back. That's not the concern. So for me, I think Halliburton is the far and away number one choice, and he may not be there at 10, which is a conversation to have, but if he's there, I think you snatch him up.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. Before I get into that, though, I kind of joked about James Jones deserving his damn respect. Actually, he actually really does deserve his damn respect, because I would argue that last offseason, if you look at how things turned out, he batted 1,000 with every move he made. I mean, there's not very few GMs you could say that about any season. But
yeah,
you killed him about the Cam Johnson pick. A lot of people killed him about the trade.
It worked out. It worked out.
A lot of people killed him.
But
a lot of people killed him about the getting Sarge. Some people killed him for Rubio. Some people got killed him for. I mean, a lot of people like the Bridges thing, but Bridges didn't look so great year one. Like
who's worse, Jared Culver or Cam Johnson? I don't know. And
Cam Johnson had a better season than Jared Culver.
Yeah, he had a better season.
Not even close. Not close, but it's
you have to look at that and say, you traded down and people thought that you were crazy, and you got a guy it's just as good as the guy.
And you got a guy who's a way better fit.
Much better fit.
So James Jones, you can make the argument. I might call him Johnson earlier. James Jones, he does deserve a lot of respect, and he really did an excellent job. And I'm actually really excited to see what he does this offseason, because this is a team that, despite the great run, they do have a lot of questions given the flux of the roster. Guys like Rubio and Oubre, who did not play during this whole bubble, which makes this kind of interesting. They could be trade pieces going into this offseason. When you look at that, and comes to targets, I agree. Tyrese Halliburton has to be your number one option. I totally agree with that. Halliburton is the exact kind of point guard that fits perfectly next to Booker, because he is a great spot up shooter. He does not necessarily look for his shot first. He's a pass first guy, so he won't have a problem with Booker, letting it fly. And he's again another kind of floor general, a guy who I think could really work well with a lot of those guys from the roster who are going to need a point guard who can get them touches, which is why Rubio worked so well with these guys. Rubio worked well with Aiden, worked well with Bridges and Johnson and Oubre. I think that Halliburton, if Rubio is gone, obviously he doesn't have Rubio's 8-9 seasons in the NBA of experience, but he does have a great head on his shoulders, a great just a really great floor presence that I think will help. And if Rubio is there, which I think is still possible, I think you couldn't ask for a better, mentor role. I think that, Halliburton could learn a lot from Ricky Rubio, and I think he actually would complement Rubio well, because, Rubio, again, not the greatest shooter, though he shot the ball pretty well this year. When you bring in Halliburton, I mean, he's a real shooter. Like, you have to guard him. Other defenses have Rubio out there. They're wanting him to shoot. It's probably why his percentages weren't as bad, because he's taking a lot of open shots. Halliburton's the guy you actually have to guard. So that actually is somewhat of a wrinkle. We may talk about how both guys are kind of pass first kind of point guards, but his real 3-point shooting ability does add a wrinkle that does make things different for the defense. So I agree. He's definitely got to be the first target. Now the question is he there at 10, which I think is very unsure.
Yeah, I mean, if we have a run up on point guards early in this draft, if Ball goes in the top 3, and then maybe Hayes goes to Chicago, and then now you're talking about Halliburton, maybe he goes to 7 to Detroit, 8 to New York, and now he's not there. And that's concerning. We even talked about in our Washington video that Washington could be a spot for point guards, and that, at 9. So you may not find yourself at a spot where you can get Tyrese Halliburton. Maybe that means you trade up.
And that's where Oubre and Rubio are going to come into the conversation, because that's going to be the question. They may have to trade up to get a guy like Halliburton, and will they be willing to lose a locker room leader in Rubio, or a big time talent in Oubre to get up to get the guy that they really need?
Right.
That's there's a very big question there.
because you have Halliburton that great of a fit with the Suns and Booker that it may be worth it to make those moves. But what do you do if you do have to stand pat? If some team, maybe because
Yeah.
sometimes not in your control. Sometimes maybe the Knicks really love Tyrese Halliburton, or the Pistons really love Tyrese Halliburton. Who are some guys that you could look at if he's not available?
So this is where if that becomes a situation where Halliburton isn't there, I think the Suns should be a big target for other teams to trade up for, and maybe the Suns to trade down. A lot of the players you have coming up after Halliburton, because I think we all agree 10, maybe 11, but I don't see the Suns passing up on them. 10 really feels like the floor for Halliburton.
Yes.
So
yeah.
if that's the case, you're just looking at a lot of wing players, and the Suns just have a lot of that. You have Oubre, Johnson, Bridges, and of course Booker is a wing player. He's a shooting guard. You just don't need another wing player. It's not no disrespect to any of the guys. Both Bays, obviously Vassell, Neesmith, Josh Green, all good, fine players, just not players for the Suns. Unless the Suns are gonna wheel and deal, and they're gonna use maybe one of those guys to maybe trade for a guard. Again, that's we're getting super NBA 2K GM like, but. If we're kind of being more basic, it doesn't seem like there's a fit for a lot of the guys that will come up. So if I'm the Suns, I'm looking to trade down, and I'm looking for a point guard a little later because I just don't think 10.
Who's that guy?
I put Cole Anthony as my second target for the Suns.
I'm not feeling it.
It was between Anthony and Terry. I just feel like Terry
is even intriguing because his ability to shoot.
That's why I was intrigued by it. But Terry just feels a lot like Jerome.
Yes.
And
I like that Jerome.
Right, and I do too. I'm not saying Jerome just isn't ever going to be a player. I don't think he's a starter. But so that's the thing. So if Jerome does become a player, all right, well now I got two guys who I think are very similar players. Jerome's a little taller, but that's really it. That's the only difference between those guys.
Yeah.
So I got to get someone different than that. I thought about Kyra Lewis. I think Kyra Lewis needs the ball in his hands a lot. I know Booker needs the ball in his hand. So I was like, okay, well, can I get someone who can play off the ball, who can score, but also can facilitate a little bit too? That's where I landed on Cole Anthony, as I thought the guy who made the most sense. Cole Anthony, I think he can shoot. I know his shooting was a little, especially early on in the season, he struggled a little bit, but we know Cole Anthony can hit shots. I know he has a great floor presence, and I'm not crazy about him in the top 10, but if I'm drafting him at 15 or 16, I think he's definitely within that range, and I would take a flyer on him. So I wouldn't call.
Yeah. We've talked about Cole Anthony a lot on this YouTube channel. We're big fans of him. I'm definitely a big fan of him, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think he needs to be on a team where the backcourt scoring is really a thing of need, and I don't know if it is with that team when you have Devin Booker.
Well, I put backcourt scoring. I think it is. I disagree. I think besides Devin Booker, they don't have any other backcourt scoring.
And that is fair. I guess I'm thinking like in that starter role. Like if we're talking about him next to Devin Booker, Cole Anthony has always been such a shoot first kind of guy. I think he could be a good guy he could be a good change of pace off the bench guard, which may end up being what he is. But
you may think of quickly though. You may think of them clashing. But what if they're more like? I don't want to. This is maybe the best backcourt in the NBA. But what if they're more like Lillard and McCollum? I mean, both guys can play on the ball or off the ball. Lillard and McCollum to me have a very special relationship, and that's what makes that work for a lot of the reasons. But I think Devin Booker is eager to have a backcourt mate of that caliber. I think he loves Rubio. Rubio gives him the ball a lot, and they have a great relationship too. But I don't think Booker's the kind of guy that. I think he wants to play with other great players. I think he doesn't care what their talent and skill level is. I think he feels like he can adjust to whoever he plays with. That's the impression I get from him. I think he thinks that a lot of people don't give him enough credit for being a much better teammate and much better kind of malleable player compared to whoever's on his roster. I think he gets to him a bad rap as just being just a gunner. So
right.
I think he would actually embrace playing with a guy as talented as Cole Anthony.
Yeah,
that's Anthony, and I would give him that shot.
You may not even have to. You may not. He's a guy that you could just draft at 10. Honestly, like I don't know how long he's staying in this draft. I don't know if he's getting out of the lottery.
The 10 just feels high for me for Cole.
I mean, I love Cole Anthony. I would draft him.
I know you do.
I would, if you needed a point guard, I would consider him in the top 5 or 6. But his obviously where his projection is up and down. Some people have him going mid-20s in his draft. So I don't know where he ends up going. But to me, like as a Celtics fan, like I don't really necessarily want him going past 14. So that's where I'm like, where do you get him?
So
to me, I think
yeah.
If you're trading down for a point guard, the two guys I'm looking at, well, first of all, obviously Robert Sarver is gonna pound the table virtually at his home in likely Phoenix, I would imagine, or Tucson,
some rich area of Arizona. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. To get Nico Mannion, obviously local Arizona point guard, from Arizona, played obviously at U of A. Robert Sarver was a big reason why they ended up with DeAndre Ayton over Luka Doncic. So, and he's also a big reason why they ended up with Josh Jackson over Jason Tatum, but that's another conversation. But no, I think that that's a guy. I actually think he could be a decent fit. Obviously he's local, but he also fits that mold of a guy who can play make and get the ball to Booker. Defensively, I have concerns about where he really fits on that roster in that lineup. But again, the local piece helps. But I think the guy primarily, if you're talking about just a pure basketball fit, if you can't get Tyrese Halliburton, I think RJ Hampton could be a guy that also fits what you're talking about a little bit when you talk about that talent level of a Cole Anthony, a guy that could play with Devin Booker. Also is a little bit of a scorer. I've never really looked at RJ Hampton as a floor general either. Maybe I'm being a hypocrite and saying, Cole Anthony's a bad fit, but RJ Hampton isn't. But I don't know. I like the size, and he is a point guard, and I guess so is Cole Anthony. But like Cole Anthony, a lot of people look at him as a little shooting guard. Whereas I think RJ Hampton, playing next to Devin Booker, he's always seemed like a guy that's wanted to play with great players and has wanted to, be around great players. And I think playing with Devin Booker, he would relish that opportunity to learn from Book. And I think that he's a guy with a tremendous ceiling, in terms of his talent level, his physical profile. Obviously he may not be NBA ready from day one, but he's got skills. So he could be more NBA ready than people expect. And if you're trading down, I think he may actually be the best fit at that spot. The concern is just, look, Devin Booker, obviously things are great now because he's, they played obviously tremendous in the bubble. But if you draft a guy like RJ Hampton, that is a risk. It is a guy that maybe can't play for you. And, they can't afford to swing and miss on this pick. They gotta, at this point where they're at with Devin Booker, they've got to hit singles to make them feel like they're getting, even if it's just optically, make them feel like they are progressing. Because you can't have another Dragon Bender. A Dragon Bender, was that even their pick? I always forget. He's been on like 20 teams.
Yeah, Dragon Bender.
Yeah, you can't even have. Exactly. You can't have another Dragon Bender. You can't have another Marquise Chris. Like you have to start.
That was the same draft.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely had that happen again.
And so it's good to get a guy like Cam Johnson, who was a safe pick. James Jones knew Cam Johnson. You were right. Would be a single. Man, he's not a triple. He's not a home run, but he's a single, double kind of pick. And you may need to hit another one of those. And that's where Tyrese Halliburton comes into play. I think RJ Hampton, Cole Anthony may be swinging a little bit more for the fences. And if it works, then great. Now again, you have one of the best backcourts in the league. If it doesn't, Devin Booker, could be playing in Minnesota.
That's definitely not the note Suns fans want to end on, especially considering how well their season ended. But what do you guys think the Phoenix Suns should do coming into this NBA draft? Make sure you guys leave a comment on what you guys thought about our ideas, or if you guys think you have better ideas or different ideas. At least I don't think they're better, but different ideas as to what the Suns may want to do this upcoming NBA draft, and of course in this offseason. Make sure, of course, you check out all of our videos by subscribing to the channel Generation Media. Plenty of more NBA draft content, virtual NBA draft war room session is coming up, so be on the lookout for that. That'll do it for now. For Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.